Please be seated. Happy Transfiguration Day, friends. I always get excited when a fixed date feast of our Lord falls on a Sunday, shoving aside the humdrum propers to make way for a party, white frontal, gaudy blossoms, a bishop. The Catholic Encyclopedia tells us that the Latin Church was slow in adopting this feast. It is not mentioned before 850 AD. It was adopted in the liturgy about the 10th century in many dioceses and was celebrated mostly on the 6th of August. In 1456, Pope Calixtus III extended the feast to the Universal Church in memory of the victory gained by Hunyadi at Belgrade over the Turks on the 6th of August, 1456. So we got this celebration thanks to a routing of some Muslims. It's still not clear why August 6th is the day, though I favor Philip Kozlowski's argument that, falling exactly 40 days before the Feast of the Holy Cross on the 14th of September, it achieves unity by connecting Jesus' transfiguration to the cross, helping us to see the glory in both. Awful. That's what it was like for Peter, John, and James. Or, as I bet Keanu Reeves said in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, awesome, dude. Up to this point in Jesus' story, he had been born to a virgin mother, impressed the temple scholars as a tween, thwarted the devil, claimed himself the fulfillment of prophecy in the synagogue, preached justice, comforted the oppressed, challenged the authorities, healed the sick, cured the lame, restored life to the dead, claimed that he would rise from the dead, and was thought to be either Elijah 2.0 or the anointed of God, heir to David's throne. All pretty impressive. But though he had demonstrated some pretty exceptional qualities, in the eyes of all, he is still just human. A pretty special dude, but merely human. If God were at all like Seinfeld's George Costanza, God might have been thinking, you gotta put on a show. You always gotta give him a big show. You always have to be on. Otherwise, why would they like me? They'd just go for a better looking guy with more money. Think golden calf. Of course, George was talking about women, but God would be talking about all humanity. Thus, God pulled out all the stops, organist lingo, the mountaintop setting, the refulgent costumes, the white paste makeup, the sparkling wig, the all-star supporting cast, the fog machine, the booming disembodied voice, and put on a razzle-dazzle spectacular for a very select audience, Peter, John, and James. Not even all the disciples, just 3. There's a feast of theological import in this gathering and these symbols, of course. The evangelists might not have been the most refined writers, but they managed to fix a lot of meat onto their rather bony words. In appearing with Moses and Elijah, it becomes clear that Jesus is neither of them, as some had speculated. That Jesus speaks directly with Moses and Elijah, he is given authority to interpret their teachings. The Transfiguration is an essential hinge point in Jesus' life and ministry because, despite Peter's recent recognition of him as the Messiah of God, it is only from this awesome encounter that the disciples begin to understand that Jesus isn't just the anointed of God, but the Son of God. Awful, as in inspiring awe. Jesus' divinity ups his game. Awesome, dude. Rarely do mere mortals have an experience of the divine like that of Peter, John, and James. But we can all experience awe, described by psychologist Dacher Keltner as the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your understanding of the world. One of my personal frustrations with Christianity is a paucity of biblical material connecting us humans to the endlessly rich and fascinating world, web of life, and universe around us, despite scriptural claims of their divine origins. Humanity's relationship to the natural world, shaped by the Abrahamic tradition, was tainted from the get-go by the God-attributed command in Genesis 1 to subdue and dominate it. The non-human world has been reeling from humanity's tyranny ever since, and now we're moving closer to reaching out to exploit the moon, Mars, and some mineral-rich asteroids. This deficit of biblical creation care theology is understandable inasmuch as the contemporary impacts of population, land use, travel, and consumption were all much lighter. In biblical times, people weren't contending with the economic ambiguities of global free trade and certainly had no fear of human-caused climate change from the exploitation of ancient carbon reserves. If over-farming exhausted the land, there was more land to move onto, right up into the modern era. Genesis told the people that they ruled creation, and science had not yet revealed that so-called lesser creatures also think and feel. I've been an environmentalist for almost as long as I've been a Christian, and I want a religion that teaches me to be awed by the crazy variety and resourcefulness of living things who lurk in the shadows, skirt around the edges, and recoil from the actions of our pathologically self-centered societies. I envy followers of other spiritual paths. Much Native American spirituality, for example, understands the created world as sacred to a degree that most Christians don't. In her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer, biologist and enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, argues that if we were to address the plants and rocks and animals around us as him or her or them, and not as it, we would transform our relationships with them. Could this be our way out of strip mining the earth, deforesting the land, overfishing the seas, and abusing pigs on our industrial farms? Early this year, Hope Reese wrote in an article in the New York Times entitled, "How a Bit of Awe Can Improve Your Health." Awe can mean many things. It can be witnessing a total solar eclipse or seeing your child take her first steps. If you've never experienced a total solar eclipse, I think it's hard to appreciate and apprehend the awe it evokes. Perhaps, like me, you've seen a partial or annular solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse. They're pretty cool. Recalling this article by Hope Reese and sketching out this sermon coincided with booking a trip to Texas for me, my husband, and my parents to see the total eclipse that will slice across North America next 8th April. You can drive up to the north of Maine or Burlington, Vermont, or Plattsburgh, New York, and watch it if it's not cloudy. It reminded me of my singular experience of awe upon witnessing my first solar eclipse from Idaho in August 2017 over the majestic Tetons. Members of my family in South Carolina were living less than an hour's drive from the path of that same 2017 eclipse. I asked them by text that morning if they were going to see it. They replied that they'd watch it from home, in partiality. When totality arrived in Driggs, Idaho, I was totally blown away. I wept. I felt swept off my feet. It was a profound spiritual experience, indescribably awesome. I imagine Paul's experience of being swept up to the third heaven was akin to this. I was sorry for my relatives who missed it, because the difference between a partial solar eclipse and a total solar eclipse is like the difference between riding the Ferris wheel at the county fair and a trip to outer space. There is no comparison. But one needn't travel 2,000 miles to be awed. Christopher and I live along Trout Brook on the South Portland Cape Elizabeth town line, and our property and those around us guard a forested, marshy buffer along the stream. Since the start of COVID shutdowns in 2020, I've become something of an avid amateur bird watcher. Following surgery in early May, I was homebound for a month, some of you may remember, and this coincided with spring migrations. I started looking and listening, and letting Merlin, a birding app, listen for me, along Trout Brook. And in the month of May alone, Merlin and I, mostly Merlin, detected 62 species of birds. 62. Probably more kinds of birds than I had ever seen or heard in my entire life in 1 month. I never saw the vast majority of these, and I wasn't able to identify most of their songs. But the diversity of winged creatures stopping off in our backyard astounded me. I suspect that many Native Americans of traditional spirituality would welcome them back with greetings and songs and prayers, like relatives returning for another visit. Why don't we, too, these fellow creatures of God? Awe-inspiring experiences happen around us all the time. We can even seek them out. Some of you may remember the 1970s phenomenon of the recording Songs of the Humpback Whale by marine scientist Roger Payne. I was 10 when, in 1979, National Geographic, do the math. I was 10 when, in 1979, National Geographic included, with copies of the magazine, a flexi disc containing excerpts. It was a little plastic square, flimsy, and it was a record. Some of you don't know what records are, but it's a thing that turns, and there's a needle, and it plays music, often through a sort of trumpet-shaped speaker. So anyway, I listened to that when I was 10. And Brian Clark Howard wrote in 2016 that these discs turned into a cultural sensation. They ultimately led to increased awareness about the plight of whales and helped put pressure on illegal whaling. This was a kind of societal awe. Radio Expeditions correspondent Alex Chadwick said that the release of those recordings was one of the landmark events in changing the way humans perceive the animal world. Nowadays, we're learning that trees talk to each other. Ecologist Suzanne Simard has shown how trees use a network of soil fungi to communicate their needs and aid neighboring plants. The James Webb Space Telescope, like Hubble before it, show us astounding images and events of the farthest reaches of space and time. In the 1970s, astronomer Carl Sagan declared, preached, if I may be so bold, "The cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the universe to know itself." The God who transfigured the blessed Son Jesus before the 3 disciples is also the creator of this universe, of course. And the prophet Amos charges his reader to seek God, who longs for a just world, saying, "Seek the Lord, and ye shall live. Ye who turn judgment to wormwood and leave off righteousness in the earth, seek him that maketh the 7 stars and Orion, and turneth the shadow of death into the morning, and maketh the day dark with night, that calleth for the waters of the sea, and poureth them out upon the face of the earth. The Lord is his name, that strengtheneth the spoiled against the strong, so that the spoiled shall come against the fortress." This God has a vision for a world of justice and peace, of lions and lambs lying down together. As God created the universe through the miraculous complexity of disks of dust, spinning for eons in the vast vacuum of space, we have the creation around us as a textbook of God's infinite reach, unimaginable, inconceivable, awesome. Perhaps the wordless wisdom found in creation, this physical creation that sparkles and spins and grows and flows around us and well beyond our sight, has been downplayed for too long. An awful spectacle on the mountaintop revealed Jesus' divinity. Awesome phenomena around us and within us would reveal to us divinity in all creation if we look. As we learn to love Jesus, our divine Savior, these too can help us learn to love, respect, and care for them all too, and the divine within them. That would be awesome, dude.
We believe in one God.